Welcome back to another episode of Meredith with a Y. I am your host, Meredith Willits. Today on Meredith with a Y, we're tackling one of the most urgent issues in America, the collapse of our healthcare system and what it means for patients, providers, and every community in between. My guest today, Dr. Peter Kowey, is a renowned cardiologist, educator, and thought leader who has spent his career on the front lines of medicine. He holds the William Wyckoff Smith Chair in Cardiovascular Research and serves as Professor of Medicine and Clinical Pharmacology at Thomas Jefferson University. Over his decades of work, he's authored more than 450 scientific publications, trained hundreds of physicians around the world, and helped pioneer life-saving treatments for heart rhythm disorders. Dr. Kowey's book, Failure to Treat: How a Broken Healthcare System Puts Patients and Practitioners at Risk, takes an unflinching look at how policy decisions, profit-driven care, and systemic neglect have created the healthcare deserts we're seeing today, and what we can still do to fix it. This conversation is about accountability, humanity, and how we all can help build a system that truly heals. So stay with us. Hello, everyone. This is Meredith with a Y, and I am your host, Meredith Willits. Today, we are going to go deep, changing lives, and I am giving you the keys to the castle. Thank you so much for being here today. I'm so excited to talk to you because I have so many things right now in my life and in families' lives and what's going on in the world today. So this is exactly why I invited you. So thanks for being here.
It's great to be here, Meredith. Thanks for the invitation.
Yeah, of course. So you wrote this incredible book, Failure to Treat, and this is not a book that anybody in the world should not be reading. This is a handbook, especially if you have yourself or a loved one in the healthcare system today. My mom's currently dealing with a health crisis at the Cleveland Clinic, and I was there with her for 2 weeks. And if you have someone in the healthcare system today, you need to be sitting next to them the entire time doctors are speaking. You need to be taking notes. You need to have your recording on your phone someplace for voice memos, because you have no idea how important this book is to waking yourself up to what's going on out there.
Well, that's very generous, Meredith. That was the goal. I mean, you hit it right on the head. The goal was to do exactly what you said, which is to try to get the conversation started, but also to empower people so that they could figure out ways to manage their way through this healthcare system that we all have to deal with on a daily basis.
Yeah, two examples recently. One, we were sitting with one of the top oncologists for lymphoma in the country at the Cleveland Clinic. Brilliant doctor. And I am laser focused. My son was very sick when he was born. So a lot of what you're talking about in this book just hit home for me. And I am someone that believes that if you are alone in a doctor's office and they give you some sort of news, you stay on the news, the doctor keeps on talking, and you miss all of this after the news, right? You need that second set of ears. Mm-hmm. And as my mom is dealing with, and she told me I can talk about this on my podcast, otherwise I wouldn't be. She gave me permission. As the doctor's talking, my mom is nauseous. She's dizzy. She's dealing with medications. And so I said to the oncologist, I said, well, what about that one thing? And she goes, oh, that's right. Thanks for reminding me. And I'm sitting there going, that would have been forgotten. Mm-hmm. Like she would have just went around with her day. And then I would have to keep up on the nurses like, well, what about this? Oh, they didn't put it in the chart yet. What about this? They haven't ordered this yet. I'm like, make sure they order it. I'm going to sit here and wait until that's ordered for my mom so I can leave tonight. And the other one, which has really hit me home recently, I had my mom all geared up with the mentality. She's a very independent woman. She's 78, very independent, owns her own landscaping business where she does all the work herself, just to give you who this woman is. But we've kind of got her in the idea that when she leaves this treatment, because she's using a walker, she's very dizzy, she's dealing with occupational therapy, and they have deemed that she does need help, that she's going to go to a rehab facility afterwards. Here comes this same oncologist, comes in. She goes, oh, yeah, you don't want to go to one of those. Yeah, you definitely don't want to go to one of those. You need to rely on your friends. This is when you lean into your friends. People get way sicker in rehab facilities than if you just would go home by yourself. Now, mind you, I live 5 hours away. My sister lives 5 hours away. And my brother, who lives by her, has 4 kids and a full-time job. And all her friends are 80. Who is she relying on that she's on a walker? Who is she relying on, et cetera, et cetera? So when another, nurse practitioner walks in, I just let her have it. And my mom was just sending me text messages from the rehab facility last night, praising me. Thank God you have me here, because I can't figure out these meds. I would never, and I think that people are across the board, they're just missing it. These doctors are missing it. The nurses, I think, have the pulse of the patient. These OTPTs have the pulse of the patient. And I think a lot of times these doctors, especially this woman's in her 40s, they're just missing all of it. And I mean, that's not even to start talking about your book. I'm just talking about what I'm dealing with right now at the Cleveland Clinic in this immediate time where we're missing it.
Mm-hmm. Well, one of the problems I had with the book was that every time I would talk to somebody when I was writing it, they would start unloading their stories.
Yeah.
Everybody has a story. Everybody has
Everybody.
your experience of things that have happened to them in the healthcare system that have been adverse and difficult. And your comment, by the way, about getting mixed messages from healthcare providers is one of the stories in the book. As you remember, there's a patient who's in the hospital and is assaulted by 20 different doctors, each of whom has a different message and a different idea about how that person should be managed. And it terribly confusing. The other point you make that is extraordinarily important is the shock that patients have in the office when they get bad news, a bad diagnosis. And what you said is absolutely true, that they just blank out the rest of it. And I know that because I routinely get calls from friends and relatives who have been in the doctor's office, and they'll call me up or they'll send me an email and say, I went to the doctor, he told me I have blah, 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 and I can't remember anything. I don't remember anything else that he or she said during the visit. Yeah. What do you think? And obviously I try to fill in, but having another person with you. Also, the other thing that people should, and I agree with you, by the way, about recording conversations, taking notes. The other thing that I really encourage patients to do is to write down their questions before they go into the office. Yes. Because they'll never remember all their questions, and they'll come away and went, oops, I forgot to ask. And good luck trying to get back online with somebody that you trust, right? Yeah. So if you don't get it right the first time, you may not get it at all. So there's all kinds of things in the book as well that are little hints and ideas for patients about how they might be able to manage this problem you're outlining.
I mean, I so much, because I had then I send the text out, right, to the connections of my mom and give them backstory. I can't tell you how many people, including my mother, said, you could make a business out of this. You could make a business, Meredith, out of just being with people in the hospital to help them parse through their care and to be that extra set of ears. I had another relative, and I just said, send me your my chart. Send me your my chart. And because he's like, I don't know. The whole thing. And so I sent him back, put it into ChatGPT. I reread it, made sure it made sense. And I said, he goes, how'd you do that? I go, I just took your chart, your, whatever that was sent, your test results, and I put it into ChatGPT, and I said, tell me like I'm a 2-year-old what this says. Mm-hmm. And he was like, wow, that really is helpful, because when he looks at his test results, he couldn't make any sense of it. My mom didn't even have my chart downloaded. So I was telling her, I'm like, Mom, your lymphocytes are at 75% a month ago. I don't know how anyone wasn't seeing that you had lymphoma. Since then, you're walking sideways, nauseous, throwing up. And she went to the Cleveland Clinic twice. They gave her eardrops and vertigo medication. Here she has a 4.5 centimeter tumor in her cerebellum.
Ah, that's awful. Well, you bring up another two very important points. One is that the information that people can access on their medical records is very hard to decipher
Oh,
uh,
forget
for
it.
patients. The language in the reports is so arcane and difficult to understand that people just can't absorb it. And
Yeah.
you know that in our state and in many states, there's a law that says that patients are supposed to be able to access their reports just exactly when they're available, and that may be a long time before the doctor even has a chance to look at them. So patients may be not only getting mixed messages, but getting them so early that they don't have a chance, that for the doctor doesn't have a chance to really interpret them. The other thing about spending time with people in the hospital, and this again was another story in the book, is not only are you there to interpret, but you're actually there to provide care, because there's not enough nurses in the hospital to take care of the patients. So you ring a
Not at
call bell,
all.
and you can wait a very, very long time. Uh, my wife was a nurse in her like three professions ago, and one of the things that she just loved doing was bathing patients. I mean, just going in and saying, we're going to just do it. We're just going to do a bath. We're just going to clean up when we change your bed, we're going to do all that. The nurses can't do that anymore. They don't have time to do that anymore. So the care that people get in the hospital is significantly impaired and not as good as, obviously not as good as it used to be.
Well, yeah, I mean, I remember when I was leaving one day and I said, "Can you just walk with my mom?" Because her walking 3 times a day
Mhm.
was really important. And at first, they were like, before they knew who they were dealing with, here, they were like, "You need to get one of the helpers," and then they were like, "Just take her yourself." And so before I left one day, I go, "Can you walk with her at 6 o'clock?" She goes, "I have 11 patients. It's very highly unlikely that I'll get to that, but I will try." And it was imperative that she walks because she went from walking to like now she needs a walker. Like it's very important. When you decided to finally write this book, what was that moment where you said, "Holy shit, I have to put something out there in writing for the mass public for them to truly appreciate." The one story I love was the woman who ended up getting, I think it was a pacemaker because her insurance wouldn't cover the very simple pharmaceutical that would have made the problem go away, but now she has this pacemaker that has to be changed, and it's like, what are we dealing with here? Like, this is crazy. Was there a specific story when you said, "I'm done, I'm writing the damn book"?
Yeah, it actually happened when I was visiting my mentor. And I mentioned him several times in the book, Dr. Leon, Bernard Leon, who was a Nobel laureate and a very famous cardiologist, but he was my teacher. And I was visiting with him at the end of his life. He lived to be 99, by the way. But when
Wow.
he was in his late 90s, he developed a whole series of health problems and became a patient himself. And I went to visit him. I had lunch with him in Boston. He lived in Boston. He was in the Harvard system. And I had lunch with him, and he started telling me these things that were happening to him. And he said, "Peter, I just don't know. I don't know how we can fix all this. It seems like it's insurmountable." And when I agreed, and I left. And as I was flying back to Philadelphia, I started thinking, I really have to do something about this. I really feel like it's an imperative. And I started trying to figure out the best way to do it. Dr. Lown was a master storyteller. And one of the ways that he taught in doctors as well as patients and other people was by telling stories about things that had happened. And it was a very, very effective method of communication. And so that's where I came up with the idea. I'm going to tell a series of stories, true stories,
Yeah.
anonymized, obviously, but true stories about people who really went through the meat grinder in the healthcare system, but not just the problem, but also some potential solutions or things that we might be able to do to fix it. So I put the outline together and I went back to see Dr. Lown again. And we had lunch. It was a few months later. And I showed it to him and he was ecstatic. He just thought it was the greatest thing. And it really got my jets going. And that's when I started really writing hard and completing the book and getting it out there.
And you're saying that this isn't necessarily, what we're seeing isn't a funding problem. That this is a way.
No. In fact, that's the thing that's so infuriating, is that we're spending $4.5 trillion a year in the United States on healthcare. It's greater than the GDP of most developed countries. I mean, it's a tremendous amount of money that we're spending on healthcare, and we're not getting our money's worth. That, by the way, that's $13,000 per person in the United States that we spend on healthcare. And I can guarantee you that we're not getting $13,000 worth of value from that on an average. The resources are definitely there. It's just the money is just being misallocated.
So would you say, someone just commented from Facebook, that it's a greed problem or a mismanagement problem?
It's both. It clearly is both. There are people, unfortunately, many of them are doctors, who are bilking the system, running the system, making a lot of money, doing things that are not necessary or that perhaps could be done in a much more simple fashion. So that's one part of it. We've seen, for example, private equity's incursion into the healthcare market, and they're obviously in it for the profits. But in addition to that, we have had a gross amount of mismanagement. The healthcare systems have been taken over by people who are accountants, people who count beans, not by healthcare providers. And they don't understand the core business, and they make decisions which are really detrimental to the healthcare system. So it's actually both, and it's created a real witch's stew of problems that we're trying to deal with.
What do you say to people that look at like socialized medicine, Canada, for example? And, we have this very nationalistic belief system in the United States where we're the best of everything, period, end of story, full stop, right? No matter what the facts and figures tell. What do you say to people that poo-poo going with a, universal healthcare for all system, because, in Canada, you don't get to get an MRI for 6 months, or you don't get to see a doctor for 3 months, and that. What's your take on going towards more of a universal healthcare system where people and systems benefit from health versus benefiting from illness?
You've said a number of things there that are very important. First of all, I agree that providing universal health care is somewhat problematic because of the potential costs. But I think that we would all agree, and I think most Americans would agree, that providing a basic level of health care, we're not talking about all the bells and whistles, of every little research thing that comes along, just a basic health care plan so that you can see your primary care doctor. If you have a problem, you can go to the emergency room with the expectation that your care will be paid for, that you get your medications at a reasonable price, that if you need to have rehab or something like that, it's available. The basics of medical care should be available to all Americans. And it doesn't need to cost a gazillion dollars. It can be done in a reasonably economic way. And as I said earlier, we're already spending a lot of money on healthcare. We could take some of that money and certainly make that possible. The compromise is that, yes, there will be some degree of rationing. And if you really wanted to have a very high level of care, you could buy it. You could buy your extra insurance on top of the basic plans if you really wanted to have better access, et cetera. But we cannot go on the way we're going with a large percentage of people in the United States disenfranchised completely. No health insurance, even worse, our middle class now underinsured. So they have these $5,000 deductible plans, and everything is excluded, and they have to fight with the insurance company to get anything covered. I mean, that's just not a system that's viable over the long term. And It has caused major problems. The last thing that I'll say about this is that you can criticize Canada, the Canadian plan all you want, but their outcomes are better than ours. Okay,
Yeah.
so infant mortality, vaccination rates, life expectancy, any measure you want to use, they do better than we do. The infuriating part here is we spend all this money and we're not really getting the results that we want.
Yeah. I saw something last night and looked into it, and it's especially with all of this conversation now about premiums and the ACA going away, people's health care going up to 300% for some folks, for their monthly premiums going up, where it's called a primary care clinic. And so I looked into this, and for a family of, I think it was 4 people, you could prepay it. It would give you 24-hour access to a doctor, home visits, all of your vaccines for your children, you name it, for $2,000 a year. You could prepay it, or you could do monthly, which was a little bit more, like, I don't know, a couple extra bucks a month if you didn't prepay it. The only thing it didn't cover was specialists and like hospital stays. So you could do a high deductible insurance policy, almost like what you're talking about. So you're $2,000 a month, and for a single person, it was way less than that. It was like $1,000, I'm sorry, a year. And then you could do one of those high deductible catastrophic plans if you ended up in the hospital. And I'm thinking that people are going to have to start turning to that if they don't figure that out. And even if they do figure out this Obamacare premium issue that's coming up with, because that's a problem. If 50% of the people pull out of healthcare and health insurance because their premiums are $3,000 a month for families, they're just going to drop their health insurance altogether.
Right.
No one's going to choose health insurance over a mortgage and food. No one can afford that.
Right.
And I think that might be, so if you're listening out there, you're watching, check into these primary care clinics, because the care is unbelievable. The access, you have phone call, you have text message, you have video visits, you have clinic visits, and then do a catastrophic plan that's, a couple $100 a month. And yes, you do have a $10,000 deductible, but that's if you end up in the hospital, if you have cancer. And they even, with what I was looking at, will if you have cancer, they'll even help you through the cancer. They're just not maybe like an oncologist or whatever. What do you see moving forward with where we're at in this country with health insurance and healthcare? I mean, is this sustainable where we're at right now?
Well, no, it's obviously not sustainable at all. By the way, the model that you're quoting does work. It's the concierge concept of paying money in order to be able to get access better and to get your questions answered and get seen quicker and that kind of stuff. And you're right. It does get you things at a primary care level, but it doesn't get you all the other stuff that you need. So you still need to have health insurance, but this is sort of superimposed. The problem, of course, is that there are so many people in this country that don't have money to pay for food.
Yeah.
So coming up with that kind of it doesn't sound like a lot of money, but a couple of grand for a family can be a backbreaker.
Yeah.
So it's not. It's a good idea if you can afford it. It's certainly a very good idea, but it's not something that's going to be accessible to the masses, I don't think. The way we're giving the patchwork system that we've put together for health insurance is really crazy. I mean, we really have not done a very good job with this at all. And the Obamacare thing actually gave us some hope, didn't it? It gave us some hope that people would be able to get affordable health care. And they did, especially with the pandemic subsidies that came along with the Obamacare. People were able to afford reasonably good health insurance, and that's obviously all going to be yanked now, in addition to losing a lot of the Medicaid coverage, in addition to the SNAP programs and the things that are going to endanger people's food security. So no, we simply can't do this. And if you think that you're rich and you're going to get away with it, think about the fact that emergency room waiting times are going to go through the roof because people who have common problems that could easily be handled by a primary care doctor they're going to escalate to the point of being really, really sick, and we're going to flood our emergency rooms with people. Waiting times, which are already absurd, are going to get even crazier. And what's other thing that's going to happen is hospitals are going to close. If we don't have enough insured patients to pay their hospital bill, hospitals are going to close, and we're going to create even more of these healthcare deserts. So everybody, even if you think that you have the means, everybody's going to suffer if we let this thing continue on the track that it's taking.
Yeah, well, I have a girlfriend, and back in the day, very, very poverty level, and they didn't have health insurance, and their doctor was going to the emergency room for everything, was the emergency room.
Right.
And I don't think that people realize that that is going to be the norm for the majority of people, and that 50% of, hospitals' income are Medicaid patients. And if they don't have that 50% rolling in, imagine if you just had 50% of your income cut. You guys have a problem, and these hospitals are going to have a problem, especially in these rural areas that depend on Medicaid income. Same with the SNAP. If SNAP money's not coming in to grocery stores, these grocery stores are going to go under. People don't realize that although you can afford it,
Right.
these grocery stores and hospitals cannot afford that type of income loss to their bottom lines, and that the people with the money are still going to feel this pain.
Right.
How are you feeling? You've obviously done a lot of research on and lived through a lot in the medical community, life, right? What do you say to people that are not getting this, that are not getting the disinformation that's coming to them from this administration about Tylenol, circumcision, vaccines? Where are you and your friends when it comes to this? Because people look at, the left, or, scientists, doctors, as being maybe greedy, or just wanting it their way, not being open to new ideas. What do you say to people who don't know what to believe anymore?
Yeah, we certainly, there's several elements in what you just said that are so very important. One is that, yes, our profession has lost the trust of many patients because of the things that unprincipled physicians have done. Some of them have been leaders of our professional societies who have not really taken their job seriously enough to argue for change. That fundamental mistrust is also because our medical education system has not turned out people who, and you said this earlier, Meredith, and I completely agree, know how to sit down and talk to a patient. I mean, we're graduating medical students who just have, all they really know how to do is stand at a computer terminal and type in things. And when it gets to bedside skills, they just don't have them anymore. So our medical education system has also let us down. And then, of course, things that happen get spread around on social media. The amount of negative publicity when a doctor does something that is completely unprincipled is really staggering. So all of those things really make it very difficult for us as physicians to operate. On the other hand, I think that we can get that all back. I think that there's still a chance for us to resurrect our reputations and to get back on track again. But it's going to take a fairly large amount of change within our system. Where is the change going to come from? Well, I tell people if they really are worried about healthcare in the next several years, and by the way, the other thing that really worries me, Meredith, is not just me, it's my grandchildren. Okay, I'm really worried about, are my grandchildren really going to be able to access medical care in the future that is effective and safe for them? If you really want to guarantee what happens to the next generations, then we need to put people in position of authority who are willing to make the decisions that we need to make. And right now, our representatives at the federal level as well as at the state level are not taking this seriously. Obviously, they're not, because how could you possibly vote on a bill that would take $1 trillion out of the Medicaid system? As a rational human being, how could you possibly have done that? So it's pretty clear that the people who are now in a position of making the rules and legislating things have got to go. I mean, they just have to be removed. And the only way that's going to happen is for people to get politically active.
I think one of the things too, as we're speaking about the problems of, Western healthcare, and I, because you hear it over and over again, is and why so many people are opting for going to Mexico to cure cancer, opting for going outside of the traditional healthcare for a lot of different things, is the lack of focus on nutrition
Mhm.
for health, the
Mhm.
lack of focus on holistic. I always try to pick a DO over a MD any day because of the holistic propensity of the mind to see the whole body. So for me, listening, watching, observing, being in it myself, my son was very sick. He had a tracheoesophageal fistula at birth. So at 23 years old, I was ass deep in the medical field for years. Um, bloop, 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 bloop from a very young age, that
Yeah,
heart
yeah,
monitor.
right.
Um, and so going through it, but listening and recognizing that people are not trusting that doctors want people truly healthy because they benefit from illness. And I think that until we switch that paradigm of doctors being the people that you go to when you're healthy to stay healthy versus whom you see when you're sick, and now we're trying to play catch up,
Mhm.
right?
Mhm.
That I think is probably the biggest thing that we need to switch in Western medicine is I'm firing you because I'm sick, basically, because you haven't done what is needed to keep me healthy. And now we're moving into like all these weight loss medications instead of having a conversation that Doritos is not actual food. It's not food. It won't kill you the first time you put it in your mouth, but it will eventually kill you. And so the lack of education around these types of things, which is why we're seeing so many home births, which every time I see a home birth video or a home birth person on social media, I'm like, both of my sons would be dead if I did a home birth. Not one of them, both of them would be dead. And that's
Right.
not to even speak of who knows about my daughters. And so, I try to go out there when I see it, not tell people how to think, not tell people what to do. You're going to do what you want to do, but here are the facts. Both of my sons would be dead. Um, I think we need to start listening to what people are wanting and needing to stay healthy instead of, because it makes sense. You benefit from me needing a heart transplant, or, you know what I mean? A quadruple bypass. This doctor benefits from me needing 17 rounds of chemo, etc. And so I think that the view, I mean, when I went in to have my first child, I had been in labor for 2 weeks. I was on breathing to keep my contractions at bay.
Right.
I
Right.
go in as a 23-year-old healthy person. They immediately put me on Pitocin. As soon as I sat down, I'm on Pitocin. They cut me from hither to thither, and the baby was 6 pounds. And I had, he had the polyhydrosis. Like, it was just a shit show from the beginning. It's like, was anyone looking at those ultrasounds? Is anyone paying attention? Why are you putting me on Pitocin? I've been in labor for 2 weeks. I don't need anything. I'm ready to go. You know what I mean? Like, and but he was at the golf course by 5 o'clock that day or home for dinner, whatever the thing is. I think that that's where we're losing our faith. Right now,
Mhm.
I'm watching a guy die from colorectal cancer on TikTok who refuses to go to the
Mhm.
doctor. And he's trying to heal himself through juicing, which to me says, I'm trying to take my power back. I don't trust
Mhm.
them. I think
Mhm.
they're going to kill me. And we're seeing this over and over again. And what I say is, look, I do sound bowls, I do energy work, but my ass is going to the doctor if I have cancer, and so is my family. And so I think we need to figure out a way to blend all of this, which I think places like Mayo Clinic are trying to do.
Mhm.
Cleveland Clinic, they're using a lot of aromatherapy, they're using sound healing in some spaces. we're seeing the beginning of it, but I think it has to come much faster.
Yeah, there's lots of, again, you ask great questions.
Thank you.
There's so many components of what you just said that I think are important. One is that we have a thing that I called in the book perverse incentives. The perverse incentive is that doctors make money when they do procedures and order tests, and we have to tone that down or get rid of it altogether, because human beings are going to who are trained to do procedures and to order tests and read tests and stuff. That's what they're going to do, because they make more money doing that than talking to a patient. So the specialties like primary care and internal medicine that emphasize sitting down with patients and educating them and doing all the stuff that you just talked about in terms of nutritional training and all that stuff are not rewarded. I mean, we don't reward people for their office practice. Primary care doctors are some of the worst paid doctors in our profession, because they don't have a procedure to do. They don't order a whole bunch of stuff, and they don't make as much money. So people don't want to go into primary care anymore. So that's one of the reasons, by the way, why we have such a shortage of primary care doctors, that we have to fill in with nurse practitioners and physician's assistants and other people. So one of the things that we really need to do is change the way we pay doctors. That absolutely has to get done. Again, something that our professional organizations and our licensing bureaus need to take into account. The other thing is that, as I said, and I said this earlier, is we have to change the way we educate doctors. So they really need to be educated to take care of the entire patient, not looking at the patient. One of the things that really drives me friggin' crazy is when a medical student refers to somebody down the hall as the gallbladder patient, or that pneumonia down the hall, naming the disease and not naming the patient, because that's the fundamental mentality. Is they're treating a disease, they're not treating the person. My mentor used to tell me, when a patient comes to your office and they have a complaint, that's their ticket into the office. But if you scratch the surface and you just ask them a few key questions, they'll unload a lot of the problems that they're having: psychological issues, family issues, job issues, things that are really contributing greatly to their, not only to their state of mind, but to their health. So all of these things are fixable, but not within the current system. The current system is it's like a runaway railroad train, that just is completely out of control. And we keep throwing gasoline on the fire by the things that we do to gain new technology. We now have so many things that we can do in cardiology, so many different tests, but they're progressively more expensive and difficult. And how do we get all of this technology to the masses of people who really are suffering because we can't take care of their basic needs? Think about something as basic as hypertension, as high blood pressure. Do you realize the impact that we could have if we could control blood pressure on our African American communities in the inner city? We could cut the number of strokes by an order of magnitude if we could control people's blood pressure. And we have the tools to do it. They just don't have doctors that they can go to will prescribe the medications. I mean, there's so many things that we could do with the money that we're wasting, that it's really, really frustrating to watch.
Well, and I know, like for myself, I look at doctors and I've said it 100 times to people, they can cut it up, cut it out, or give you a medication. There's really nothing else that's going on right now in the medical community as far as, okay, like you're saying, in the African American community, blood pressure. Well, how about we talk about stress? Are you waking up in the middle of the night? Are you sleeping through the middle of the night? How are you paying your bills? How's your family life situation? What stressors are going on in your life? I mean, I've studied Dr. Candace Pert. She's written books of mind body connection, and she talks about the T cells and inflammation. And what's the biggest killer of Americans is inflammation. And it's all coming from the brain, is sending all these inflammatory responses throughout the body that creates pain. And they've done studies with rheumatoid arthritis that it's coming from an emotional place, fibromyalgia, emotional place. If you look at the world, pick a decade, and I'll tell you what illness was. The 90s, everybody had an ulcer. Now it's plantar fasciitis. This stuff travels in packs because the brain is looking around and going, how can I get out of my life today? How can I not go into work? Because I can't call my boss and say, hi, I'm stressed the hell out. But you can say, I have an ulcer, bleeding ulcer. I'm, crapping blood or whatever. Everybody had carpal tunnel back in the early 2000s. Where'd that go? And so it's all these inflammatory responses that if you study Dr. Candace Pert, who worked for the government, who found the T cell inflammatory response that's sent by the brain, we need to start paying attention and stop cutting the check engine light and go, okay, now your blood pressure's fixed. We haven't fixed anything else about you. We haven't fixed your eating. We haven't fixed your life. You still have high blood pressure. We're just controlling it. But you're still a sick person. It's going to find its way someplace else. That's where my head's at, is let's stop cutting the check engine light and actually use the flashing light to find what's actually going on with the patient and heal them holistically, right? But that's not a big moneymaker.
Well, the word that you use that I try to emphasize, and I did in the book, is healing, not treating, not managing, but really healing the individual. And doctors have tremendous power that they don't even know that they have. When I would sit with the patient and I had something to tell them that wasn't going to be like really good news.
Yeah.
There's lots of different ways that you can deliver that, right? You can deliver it in a very negative way and make it sound like, it's the end of the world. Or you can say, look, we have a problem, but there's like lots of ways that we can manage this. And we're going to work together to try to figure out a way that we can keep you very functional and alive for a long time. And that's true. We can do that. But we really have to think about, and I completely agree with you, that if you don't deal with people's minds and their mindset about their disease, you're never going to have therapeutic success ever in any disease state. It just isn't going to happen because you're right. Until people have the right sense of themselves and state of mind, it's very, very hard to deal with the disease. And when people get sick, I think doctors underestimate how much of an upheaval it is for them. I mean, think about when you're sick. Do you think about anything else?
Nothing.
I mean, if you have a serious illness, that's all you think about. The ability to function goes down. You can't relate to people. You're depressed. But unfortunately, we just haven't really thought about that as much as we should. And I think, again, healing the individual using a holistic approach is really key to being an effective therapeutic physician.
Well, I remember when I went to my oncologist and I said, hey, I stopped taking vitamin D because it was really exacerbating my hot flashes from the tamoxifen that I was on. And he's like, oh, that's just a vitamin. And I'm like, actually, it's a hormone. And he's like, no, it's not. And so I sent him all this information from Mayo Clinic about how vitamin D is actually a hormone and it can cause hot flashes, et cetera. I mean, whatever. And he just couldn't do it. He couldn't get himself there to admit, yeah, you're right. Because I'm like, hey, if you have any other women that are coming in, ask them if they're taking vitamin D, either in their multivitamin or extra, because, they're always pushing vitamin D, that it could be problematic with taking tamoxifen. Refute, just his ego could not handle it, that he might be listening to just a woman about this. And even with going through breast cancer, it was jarring to me that they were fixing my problem, but never said, look, you and your spouse, maybe even your family, should absolutely be going to a therapist because you have no idea what you're about to go through here. And the first person I met, you'll love this. The first person I met after my 4:55 p.m. Friday night phone call that said, yes, you have cancer. The next person I talked to after that phone call was my breast cancer surgeon. And I walked in, she said, nice to meet you. And within about 4 to 5 minutes, she started telling me how fat I was and how I needed to lose weight. And like, it was so jarring. And I ended up sending her a message. I'm 5.5 years out, about like, look, I quit drinking and I've lost a ton of weight. But if I find out that you've ever talked to a patient like that and their first interaction with the healthcare profession is you telling them that they're fat when they're just trying to even absorb what breast cancer and how and where and why, I'm like, I will literally report you. Like, this is disgusting. And it made me not want to go to one of the best breast cancer surgeons in Illinois, because she is, because it was so sad. Like, she couldn't see past, and I wasn't even, I mean, I was like probably 20 pounds overweight. I look like a normal person. And that's all
It,
she could talk about.
it really is incredible how physicians are so out of touch with the impact that they can have in a patient interaction. One of the things that was really striking to me is that inflection in my voice, a facial expression could set a patient off.
Yeah.
I had a patient one time where she had a valve problem, and I was listening to her heart with my stethoscope, and it took me about it. I heard something, and I took a couple extra minutes to like listen a little bit more, and she went crazy. She said, "What's going on? You're listening longer than you've ever listened before." She knew that I was detecting something just by the way that I was examining her. Then, of course, I had to explain to her everything was fine. I just wanted to make sure I was listening to it properly. But the impact that doctors' words and facial expressions have on patients is absolutely profound. And the thing that's really ironic about this is that you can use it for the good, right? You don't have to like drive patients crazy. You could actually do some real good with a manner with patients that gives them some reassurance and some hope, which is a very important word in medical care.
Well, it's funny because as you're talking, I'm like, in that moment, right? You walk into that office, this person holds your future.
Yes.
They're looking at the numbers. They've seen it all, right? And as a patient, you're standing before this person who has that crystal ball in their throat, in their brain. And they can use it for good, or they could use it for power.
Yep.
And it's that whole God complex that we've always talked about, right, with doctors. And honestly, it's true. Because I'm imagining myself back in that office, and I remember looking at her as my momentary God, if you will, that is about to bestow upon me my future. And the power that those words were about to have on my entire life were profound. And she could have said 100,000 things, and me and my weight was never supposed to be one of them.
Of course.
Well,
the entire doctor office experience, one of the things that I talked about in the book was when doctors make you wait in the waiting room. I can't imagine. It seems to me there's no torture that's worse than waiting for an hour or 2 hours for an appointment, especially if it's a pivotal appointment for you. It's, you're going to be getting some test results. You're going to be talking about your treatment, and you're sitting in the waiting room, and you're supposed to have your appointment at 1 o'clock. It's now 3 o'clock, and you're still in the waiting room. That is torture. And unfortunately, it's another thing that people in the medical profession just don't seem to understand, that it's just sort of the price of doing business, right? You just have to sit out in the waiting room until I get to you. But things like that, or the staff at the front window, how they relate to you, right? That how they treat you is also an important component of that whole experience. And we've just lost touch with ourselves. We just haven't been able to figure out that all of these things, how they impact the patient, is certainly going to have an impact on their outcomes. How well they're going to do is predicated on their experience with everybody within that healthcare system. And we somehow have forgotten that.
Yeah, it's almost like they need a morning huddle. Like, all right, guys, you're going to be interacting with a lot of people, but you're maybe interacting with them on the worst day of their life.
Yes, close to it at least, right? I mean,
Yeah.
when we had a private practice before our practice was bought out by the health system, I hired everybody in the office, and one of the things that one of the I had a number of very very good people surrounding me. But one of the criteria was that they understood the mission of the practice. The mission of the practice was to heal people, to make people
Mm.
feel like they were important, that they were treated properly in the office, that everything that happened to them was positive, that they had plenty of time to ask questions, etc. It was a really important element in our practice, but as I said, unfortunately, with the corporatization of medicine, with all the private equity and the buyouts and all the other stuff that's happened, we've really lost touch with our patients.
Yeah, I mean when you think about the money and the private equity and you know, I've watched the Cleveland area. We used to have the Cleveland Clinic downtown and now it's and then the university healthcare system and now every single everything is got one of those titles on the building throughout the entire Cleveland area. They're all getting eaten up. And you
Yep.
think you're going to a Cleveland Clinic doctor, but what you're actually going to is a doctor that now works inside of a building that has the Cleveland Clinic imprint on it.
Right.
Um, because it's corporate, it's all being, like you said, eaten up by these big businesses.
Right.
And yeah, I don't know. I think it's going to be fascinating to watch this next, even probably decade, to see where we go and what it looks like. I think people know kind of what's going on out there because everybody has to touch the Western medical field every now and again. But I think that, like your book here, I think this really opens people's eyes to what they can do and what they need to do, how they need to be an advocate for their kids, for their loved ones, for their parents, their aging parents, as we're watching, the boomers age and um, even Gen X, is starting
Mhm.
to like get up there and needing different things.
Yep.
I think that people need to be way more educated. I remember when you were just talking about at the beginning of the hour here, you were talking about all these from your book story, all these doctors fighting about how to treat the patient. When I was 23, I just had my first son, and they said they thought that he had meningitis at birth because he was life flighted right after birth. They did not know he had a tracheoesophageal fistula. And so, okay, he's got meningitis. We have it figured out. Life is good. My husband of the time, we were going to buy cigars, whatever. We just wanted to do something, right? So we come back. Now imagine 23 years old I am. We come back in the hospital at Metro Health Medical Center. Thank you, God. Greatest hospital, teaching hospital. I tell everybody to go to teaching hospitals. They are the best. We're in the elevator and I come out of the elevator and there's a nurse standing in front of me and they're like, Mr. and Mrs. Shagavac, my name at the time. And I was like, yes. They're like, everyone's looking for you. And I'm like, okay, my son's in the NICU. And they whisk myself and my husband into an office and I have a medical doctor and I have a surgeon. And the surgeon wants to operate immediately because they've just found out that all the air that they've been blowing into his lungs has possibly perforated his stomach.
Ugh.
And the medical doctor wants to wait. And at 23 years old, I had to make a decision on who I wanted to go with. At 23 years old, I didn't even have my undergrad at the time. And I said, I want to go with the surgeon. And thank God we did because they put a button in which let the air out and then they fixed the 3 perforations in the stomach. But if you want to talk about what it means to have medical people arguing at a 23-year-old and then to sign the paper and they added and death as possible outcomes and I had to sign that and then I slid it over to my husband and I said you're signing it too because I knew at 23 I didn't want all of that signature to just be mine. It makes my stomach sick.
Yeah, it's
But that's the reality of where we're at today and how
yeah.
informed you need to be.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Oh yeah. And as the book says, if you're not in the medical profession yourself, having a friend or a relative or somebody that you trust, even if they're not in the area that you're worried about, many times they can find you through, help you navigate through the system,
Yep.
get to the right people, and ask the right questions and get the right answers. So there are ways to do this, but it's hopefully the book offers some alternatives to individuals.
I think that you and I need to come up with this advocate business. I'm
Yeah.
telling you, because
Yeah.
even just having like a doula, a health doula, if you will, that just goes through and listens and sits
Mhm.
and parses through and teaches people how to chat GPT their my chart and just to,
Yeah.
okay, like this is what this says. This is what is happening, because I think that's so, I mean, trying to get a hold of a doctor in like a Cleveland Clinic type of rush situation, you might as well trying to get a hold of somebody in a university. I've been playing phone tag with that oncologist situation for like days now for my mother. So, I mean, there's a business here because people don't know how to, like, I remember they weren't going to cover my son's entire thing, what one, and they had to change it from 603 to 630, and then it was all covered. But it was about asking those questions versus just paying the bill and going, wait a minute,
Mhm.
why isn't that covered? Oh, we did it. We billed it wrong. There's a business here, trust me, because as we get more and more digital and more 5-minute doctor appointments and more ER visits versus
Mhm.
primary visits,
Mhm.
I think that there's definitely going to be a need for people to have a little bit more hand holding as we go through this medical. But I have to tell you, failure to treat, how a broken healthcare system puts patients and practitioners at risk. This book will help you to see not just that there are problems, but the way in which these problems actually touch patients and why and how and what you can do about it so that you see it when it's happening. That's the thing. You have to be able to recognize the problem. And unless you're reading something like this book, I think a lot of times it can just fluff over you and you'll miss it. And
Mhm.
that's what I loved about the book is don't always take everything at face value. This book breaks down how these things can affect you. So
Right.
thank you. Thank you for writing this book. It's fantastic.
Well, this session was terrific, Meredith. And as I said, I have to give you credit. You asked some of the best questions I've ever had about not just about the book, but about the issue in general. I think you have a very good sense of it. Thank you.
Oh, well, thank you so much. I love people. I love seeing the world and trying to break it down and answer and ask the question why. So I think we've done a lot of that here today in this past hour. So thank you, Dr. Kowey. I really appreciate you being here. And everybody else, I'll see you here next week for another episode of Meredith with a Y. See you next time. Thanks for listening. If you would like to connect on a more personal level, head over to meredithwillits.com or on Instagram at Meredith with a Y for behind-the-scene footage and outtakes. Please subscribe and come back each week for more Meredith with a Y. Thanks again for listening.